Hello Sofa Squad and welcome back to the sofa. Now today we're going to be talking about another mysterious missing persons case. It's very sad and it's very baffling to many of us, and that is the case of Gabby Petito. Now this case, when I tell y'all this is unfolding, it seems at lightning speed. So by the time you're watching this, there could very well be more updates and all that kind of stuff, and I'll be coming back to those later on. So just know that this will have to cut off at some point. I had been down that rabbit hole today, y'all, and I'm just like, oh my God, what happened to this girl? Where is she? And I have major questions about Brian. So in today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to go over like the basic timeline of events, key points in that. I'm going to talk about, some things popping up on social media, witnesses, things like that, and also just my opinion and commentary on things along the way. Now, before we jump into this video, I do want to say thank you to everyone who makes this channel possible, everybody who comments, likes, shares, Patreons, members, mods, you name it. The sofa would not be here without you. I really appreciate it. Now, also in the description, there's tons of links to articles, stuff like that. But there's also a phone number if you have any information at all. Please reach out. Even if you think it might not mean something, doesn't matter, call. I mean, something. So many people interacted with these people. I mean, remember, this was like a couple documenting their trip on Instagram and whatnot, and so people are kind of coming out of the woodworks. And like they said, like one girl, will talk about her, she's like, I put this out there on TikTok in case it jogged anyone's memory that has dealt with Brian too. So that's exactly what's going on. So just check the description out for all that stuff. Now let's go ahead and jump on in to the video. Okay, so Brian and Gabby were a young couple, obviously, but they were part of what's known as kind of like van life. It's I don't know if you would even call it a movement as much as it's a lifestyle. And what that is it can mean many different things to many different people, but a lot of times it's people who have converted a van, they're living out of their van, they're traveling around doing that kind of a thing. You see a lot of this on Instagram, social media, things of that nature. And so they were doing this, and they documented much of this trip on their Instagram accounts, social media, things of that nature. So they were traveling in a converted white van, and they had set up, they were going to be leaving from up north in New York, and they were going to be hitting essentially all of like these major national parks, almost like a national park tour. So they would head out on July 2nd. They traveled to Monument Rocks Formation in Kansas, Colorado's Great Sand Dunes National Park, and then they went to Zion, Bryce, and Canyonlands National Parks in Utah. Okay, so let's pause there and let's kind of we're going to fast forward to August 12th, that time zone, when things really start popping off or whatever. Now they are in Utah during this time, August 12th, like around the 24th. So let's talk about August 12th, and the reason that is significant is because the Moab, Utah police had an encounter with the couple. They were called to a situation, and actually body cam footage was released of the whole interaction. So let's talk about that for a minute. So the couple had been at a place called Moonflower Co-op. Now this is like a little co-op grocery store. I looked it up, and if you've ever been to a co-op grocery store, it felt very similar to that. It was kind of touted as Utah's first organized co-op, and it just had that vibe, that energy to it. And just a little bit I've seen of the couple, I'm like, I could see them being down with that. So apparently they got into a little altercation, an argument there, and it was enough to attract the attention of others, and others ended up calling the cops on them, and the cops would pull them over a little bit down the road. Now there's a lot of different things in the police report. One person would describe it as like her having a mental health crisis. The basis of the general story in a nutshell is they got in an argument. Basically they were arguing. She was saying, oh, I have OCD and I get frustrated with him and he kind of drives me crazy. And we got in an argument. We've been cooped up for, months on end in this van, and a bunch of little things just kind of came to a head. And there you go, this argument ensued. So that took place, but things got pretty heated. Now it sounds like she was kind of coming at him, and then he maybe like grabbed her face and pushed her off. Regardless, people seeing this and hearing him yelling and stuff like that were like, oh my God, call the cops. So he's basically saying, I was like, look, we need some distance between us. Walk it off, that type thing. And she's kind of like, I was afraid he was going to leave me and like take the van and leave me in the middle of nowhere, which I do think that's interesting. We'll circle back to that. So all that's going on. Obviously, this is not good. Cops are called, and we do see the body cam footage where they pull them over. Now, in this body cam footage, and let's just go ahead and talk about that for a second. Yeah, they pull them over, and the first vibe I got off of them was almost like, well, first of all, she's crying. She's in the passenger seat. She's crying. They're like, what's wrong? And she's kind of like, we were just been arguing this morning. They both act to me at first kind of like any couple would that's being, they kind of know what happened. They know someone called the cops. They know they got a lot of hand. Oh God, here we are in this situation. Yada, yada, yada. They almost act embarrassed is what I'm getting at. And so the police separate them, and she comes out, and she is visibly upset, okay? I mean, like catching her breath, can barely speak upset. And they take her over, they talk to her, and she's like, I have OCD. I just got frustrated. I told him I was sorry for being mean. And there's that. They take him out, they question him, and for the most part, I mean, to me, my vibe was, I was like, yeah, their story is checking out with one another. You know what I mean? Like, there was nothing major red flag going off, that type thing. To me, the only major red flag I saw is, I was like, their act very, I don't even know the word for it. I'm not going to say manic, but manic almost. It's like, really intense. They are getting pulled over by the cops. They just got in an argument. Apparently it was still going on. She was like trying to hit him in the arm, all this crazy stuff. It got intense. So of course they're gonna act weird. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just didn't think much of that in that moment. He was being super nice and super over the top, like, I'm sorry, officer. I'm sorry, officer. Honestly, it was how I imagine anybody would act in that situation, like just kind of being like way over. Now, the cops would not end up filing charges over this. They would be like, you know what? They both talked about they were going to be getting married. They were in love with each other. They didn't want to press charges, any of this kind of stuff. There's no evidence, enough evidence there to be like, this was a domestic violence thing worthy of, slapping cuffs on somebody. So the end result in that whole little thing would be, they were like, look, y'all need to separate for the night, okay? So she would take the van. They took him somewhere, got him a hotel room. So there's that. Now, again, the whole fact of that she's like, I have OCD. Now, there was other redacted things in there, and I believe she had said like she is super anxious or something. They redacted him talking about some of the things that he might have going on, and I'm talking about, like mental health wise. Now, somewhere in there it was said that they are not on medication and that type thing. So let's just pause for 1 second and let me say this. If you follow my channel, then you know that Matt and I have done camper life. We've lived in a camper. We recently moved out of the camper. We're gonna be putting it somewhere. So our camper was like basically 250 square feet, okay? We had 3 dogs. I can 100% tell you that these two packing up in a van for 5 months, however long they were going to be going, or however long they were going or whatever, is intense, okay? So when they're talking about, she's like, oh, he gets on my nerves, and, he was a downer, and he's talking about, oh, it's all these little things that, kind of escalated. I get it, okay? So, because their van's way smaller than 250 square feet. So I'm just looking at like, oh yeah, we're ready to kill each other sometimes. I mean, literally, Matt and I. So, absolutely, I was like, yeah, you know what? Things just came to a head, and they kind of lost it over whatever. So, all that being said, that lays the premise for what happens later, though, because it makes this whole situation look different in a different context. Okay, so after all that takes place, okay, remember this is like August 12th. So a little over a week later, her father, Joseph, would speak to her for the last time. Now, this interaction involved him basically ordering her food from another state and having it delivered into Salt Lake City. Now, fast forward past that just a little bit. They leave that area. They head for Grand Teton National Park. Now, it's during this time that her mother will have the last FaceTime with her. And her mother will say, after that, we just, we texted a lot. Now, some more evidence has come out, and this is just kind of in the timeline of people who have seen her. And this takes place on August 25th or 26th. The owner of Rustic Row said that Brian and Gabby spent like 15-20 minutes in the store, and they had come in there in the afternoon. Now, the owner said that the two of them told her that, they were traveling from Florida to go to Yellowstone. That's where they wanted to go. And she said they basically seemed, pretty happy. And on their way out, Gabby turned around and said something like, oh, we're engaged. And, of course, she was like, oh, well, congratulations. So there was no major, bells going off in this interaction. But again, this is an alleged sighting, August 25th to 26th. Gabby is alive. She is with him. Now, this next one, y'all, I was like, oh my God. Okay. So this is August 29th. Now, and again, the links to this stuff are down here if you want to go watch it for yourself. So this information came from a TikTok user. This is the one I talked about in the beginning of the video. Okay, so she was saying, first and foremost, why she put this on TikTok was to jog other people's memories. I get it. Thank you for doing it. So her and her boyfriend had an interaction with Brian that I'm just like, ugh, this seems very creepy. So here's what the interaction was. She said that they ran into him. They were hiking at the Grand Teton National Park around 5:30 p.m. Now, this is, remember, 4 days after Gabby's family last heard from her, and like 3 days before he shows up in Florida with the van but no Gabby. Okay, so this is weird. So they run into him. He's hiking by himself, and he approaches them basically looking for a ride. And he's like, I'm going to Jackson. They're like, we're going to Jackson too. And they're like, sure, come on in. So she says the first weird thing was the fact that he offered them like $200 to give him this ride. She said it really wasn't that far. It's like 10 miles or something. So that was like really odd to them. So secondly, she said that he had been like camping and, out without his fiance. She was like working on a webpage or something. And she was like, he had these clothes on and all that. But she was like, for somebody who's been in the woods camping by themselves for several days, she was like, he really wasn't dirty. He wasn't stinky. He didn't seem like he had been out camping like that, and that does seem completely weird. So then she was saying the other weird part is that they were like, oh, we're going to Jackson Hole. And he kind of freaked out. And side note, Jackson Hole is different from Jackson. So there's that. Jackson Hole is like a valley. Jackson's like a city type place. So when he found that out, he's like all freaked out, like, oh, let me out. So it was just this very bizarre interaction with him, without Gabby. And again, it's another piece in the puzzle of this mysterious timeline. Now, another aspect that kind of is a little suspect. Okay, so Gabby was supposed to meet her friend in Yellowstone August 30th, and they were going to catch up and touch base on her birthday, I think on August 29th, to firm up plans, all that kind of thing. Well, this friend never heard from her again. Now, here's the other thing. So that's obviously weird. But she was also like, well, look, if allegedly Gabby sent her last text message to her parents around that time, why wouldn't she have at least texted me to be like, can't make it, something's up or whatever? I 100% agree. And my first thought is because that wasn't her sending the text message. So let's go ahead and talk about that text message. So like I said, Gabby had allegedly texted her mother, and she was already being like, at this point, and I say this is alleging the fact that Gabby was still communicating and making these text messages, or not, I should say. So she had been quiet, all that kind of stuff, and so they've been trying to get up, and so all her mother received is a text message saying, no service in Yosemite. And then this is when, this is the last communication. So piece that together right there. First of all, that's just weird. To me, that says this. That says it's not Gabby responding. This is somebody who knows you're trying to get up with them, and they're putting it off, and then they're sending you I'm just pushing this through to let you know there ain't no service. I mean, come on. So there's all that. So let's talk about September 1st. Brian comes back home to Florida with their little converted van. You know, good, like, nice to be home. One thing's missing though. It's Gabby, okay? That is the crux of this case. That is the whole thing here. He shows back up home without Gabby. He has not cooperated with police or investigators. He has lawyered up. None of that looks good, okay? So by September 11th, her parents, I mean, they're like, no, what is up? You know, a missing persons thing is put out. Investigators go to the house. They take the van. It is processed by the FBI. Now, at the time of this recording, I don't know if they found anything. I would think if they would, he would be arrested, but maybe they could also be doing information and whatnot, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But regardless, at the time of this recording, to my knowledge, they didn't find anything in the van. That could change by the time you watch this, though. Now, in all this, Brian is also named a person of interest. So that is major. Obviously, it kind of, so side note, it shocks me that more hasn't been done with him yet, because I just feel like, I mean, come on. I get why somebody, if they have something to hide, wouldn't want to speak to people and would lawyer up. It's so weird to me that this was his fiance. He comes home without her, is not communicating with her family, is not helping at all, and saying anything at all. That is bizarre to me. That is so not right. I don't even know what to say about that part. Okay, that was my tangent. Let's keep going with the timeline. Okay, so September 16th, the father makes a public statement. And he's like, you know what? Finding Gabby is the most important thing. You know, Brian is not important. The only reason he's important is because he has information as to where she is. And at this point, honestly, as a father, I imagine he's probably sitting here saying, you wanted to marry my daughter and you wouldn't even tell us what happened to her, where she's at? Like, the only reason we give to you know what's about you right now is because we need information out of you, and once we get that, oh, we're done. You know, whatever that might be. I mean, hopefully it's not sinister or bad, but you know what I'm saying? I mean, who does that? I mean, who does that? Now, the family's attorney also read a letter by them, which is essentially making a plea to his family. And you know, this is the heartbreaking part, because I agree with all the stuff they're saying. They're just like, you know what, we called this girl like our future daughter-in-law. You know what I'm saying? Like, she lived with you. Like, how could you be okay knowing that we are going crazy, wondering where this girl is at? Someone who was a part of your family. How could you be okay as parents knowing the agony we are going through and not being willing to help us in any way? I mean, it's shocking. And in the letter they do say, you know what, we believe that you know where the location is that he left her. And they are begging them, you know, please tell us. Help us out as parents, as people, as, you know, part of your family. Now, just earlier this evening, protesters had gathered outside of their home. They want answers. You know, where is she? What is information? Why aren't you talking? The whole 9 yards. Now, police were seen going into the home. This is major. And allegedly, now I've not seen everything, and literally all this just happened, okay? I probably shouldn't be talking about it on here because it could be obsolete information. So just know that with a grain of salt, that this literally just took place. But it was alleged that maybe they took some stuff out of the house, but they were there 100%. They're like, we are here to talk to the parents. We're not talking to Brian. So he has that right, whatever, which I find that really interesting. Now, I think they had ruffled around in a car outside, and then they went back inside. So I am so curious to see if her parents will come out and say, this is what we learned from that meeting. Another thing, I'm just like, well, thank God they're over there talking to him. I just find it really hard to believe there's not enough evidence to do something about this yet. But I'm just very impatiently, I do think there will be very soon. So here's my thing. First of all this. Like I said earlier, van life, camper life, all that, yes, it can be very stressful in a relationship. I don't want to even sit here and say, oh, I think he did this or I think he did that. I don't trust him, okay, at all. I think he's guilty of something, what I don't know. I want to hold out hope that she is still here and she's going to come home. So that's the only reason I'm hesitant to be like, ugh. But I think he had a long time to cook up his alibi. I think that she has been not with him, we will say, for much longer than he would be letting on. The fact that he came right home and lawyered up and all that, not cute. These are some of the vibes that I'm expecting to hear from him or his lawyers or something. First and foremost, the easiest one. We got in a fight and she told me to leave her. So I left her. I don't know where she's at. We got in an argument. She said she was going off. 100% that is the story I'm waiting to hear. Okay. Secondly, she got upset or something happened and she jumped off a cliff. I didn't want her to do it, but she did it and I freaked out. Something along those lines. I personally think he's going to go with the she ran off on her own. And I could be wrong. That's all alleged. Where I think he will get messed up, because remember, these are people who were Instagramming and this whole trip. So there is so much data and electronical evidence to be pulled and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, numerous people have run into and had encounters with him, with her, the whole 9 yards. So if he sits here and tries to piece together his little timeline and he says, oh, well, this happened here, it's going to be easy to fall apart because of these little things right here. So that's it for right now, y'all. Please drop a comment if you want to add to this timeline, whatever. I will definitely be following up on this. But again, I wanted to get this out there while it's all fresh in my mind, because I've just been kind of in that rabbit hole when I could today. And my heart goes out to her family. Again, the phone number's down there. If you feel like you know any information at all, please call, please help bring Gabby back home where she deserves to be and bring justice to whatever justice needs to be brought to, whether that's just holding somebody accountable for being a crappy person or an evil person. I really appreciate all of y'all, and I'll talk to you soon.